Well, hi folks, this is the second of at least 8 sessions that we're going to have here on video, and I wanted to say welcome and then also hope the things are going well for you in the class so far. I hope it's clear. If you ever have any problems where you're not understanding something, or you've got a little bit of confusion about assignments or anything to do with this course, feel free to contact me. And I've told this many times and I'll put it up again and again. My private email, which might be a little bit easier, is robdawalt@me.com. And in case of like a severe emergency, you can always call me at 765-506-7322. Now, I would say to you that, generally speaking, you'll find information in the syllabus that'll give you a better way to contact me through the course. But again, if the course is down or something's down and you've got a concern, you can always contact me. I prefer you do it on the private email. Well, okay, social and self-control theories are the focus of this session. Social control kind of goes back first, talk about it, clear back to the 1920s. There's some good studies on this about why do children, resort to delinquency and misbehavior and later crime. And so, this group, they're called it's a couple, married couple from Harvard. Name is Glueck, and that is spelled G-L-U-E-C-K. And they did this long-term longitudinal study from 1920 till 1950, and in that time period they actually found a number of children. They took 500 children in 1930 actually, and when they were ready to really do their study, and they focused on them for 20 years, and then even followed up with many of them years later, like about 10 years later, 1960. So what ended up happening here was they took 500 students from public school, non-delinquent students that conformed their behavior to standards, and then they also took 500 students from correctional institutions. And so these were all adolescent young men, and they studied all different things about them. The way they did this, they did multiple interviews, hundreds of interviews with these 500 kids. And they did it for both groups. They talked to their parents, they talked to their teachers, they talked to their preachers, they talked to their neighbors, and friends, anybody that they could come up with that they would interview. They interviewed these people. In addition, they looked at documentary evidence like school records, behavior records, even juvenile records. And then they also talked to social workers and people in social welfare programs. And so they pulled this all together and they came to some conclusions. And they wrote their biggest book on this in 1950. And the book is called Unraveling Juvenile Delinquency. Unraveling Juvenile Delinquency. And the thing about that is that is a common book that people that work in this field are aware of, and they now just kind of fondly refer to it as UJD. So you can try to look for this, and might be a good outside source to take a glance at. Now, some of this information is somewhat dated. Frankly, the IRBs in the current age that we live would not even allow a study like this to go on. They would say that it was too intrusive. But later groups have tried to test the reliability, and many studies have found it to be, in fact, reliable, even clear up in through the 1980s. Now, they couldn't fully replicate it because of these new rules, but 3 things emerge from these studies, and that is age of onset is very important. So in other words, if a 5-year-old child, like I used to tell about, I had a student 5 years old in kindergarten that was stealing the milk money, and if you follow the trajectory of his life, his name was Johnny, and I dealt with him throughout my whole career, and it was one of my first cases that I had in a juvenile court system when I was involved in Indiana, and I followed him all the way into the adult system. And so he went from being a neglected child to being a little thief to later a much larger person, aggressive, angry, and very violent, and was involved in a number of serious crimes, including robbery with a gun and things like that. And as I believe today, I think he's still in prison. So basically it's an entire life wasted, which is very sad, because he was, it seemed like, a very nice young man, but had so many problems, and here was a perfect example of a case of total neglect by the parent who was a drug addict. And so that seems to fit. So age of onset, very important. A second thing that's important is that antisocial behavior, as we see with my case I described, Johnny, it is true that antisocial behavior becomes stable. And so that means that that's the norm for this person. They're always doing this. And when we say stable, that doesn't mean that the crimes don't get worse. I mean, it's just some form of crime their entire life is what we mean by stability. And I often refer to it as the escalator of crime. They start with these petty crimes, and then they move on to more serious, more violent, more life-threatening. That's not always true, but in some of these extreme cases where children start at an early age, it is true. Now, number 3 of this is that basically they're going to focus in on family environment. In other words, the Gluecks determined that the family environment was the biggest important factor in the outcome of a child's life. Would the child be law-abiding? Would the child be angry, violent, unhappy, and basically, they simply put, a criminal. And so that is what they determined, and later studies found that that seems to be true. And then there started a new group, which is the social control group, and they tended toward a different outlook, and they said, you know, everybody has some angry outbursts as a baby. You know, I know I cried, you cried, we all cried when we're hungry as a tiny baby. How do we get attention? You know, we get attention by what would be considered antisocial behavior, an outburst of some kind. I remember a case, my son was really young, and he would beat his head on the floor if he didn't get his way. I mean, I'm talking about a 1-year-old baby, you know, and we just, of course, were scared to death, but that was not uncommon. My mother has stories about me holding my breath till I got my way. And so in the social control group, they said, look, seems like everybody's somewhat antisocial, so how is it that a person becomes social? And so they said that it actually, from looking at it from the other perspective, there are 4 things to look at. And that is attachment or caring about others, like your mother and your parents. 2, commitment or buy-in to the system. In other words, does your parent, you know, first of all, you love your parents or you're attached to them, and then they kind of teach you that you need to be committed or buy into the social norms of the day. And then you get invested in it, and you want to be, you know, a good citizen. And then the 3rd thing is involvement, and this is bonding to society. And you know, they see not just your mother, but all of society as generally your friends, your neighbors, as good, and that you want to help them, you want to support them in any way that you can. And so then belief. And then when you have inculcated your belief system, which is almost like, could be your religion or whatever, you draw on whatever, philosophers, religion, whatever, and you determine that you're going to shun bad behavior. In other words, you don't want bad behavior, you're against it. And the reason for that is that it has bad effects on the overall society, that it hurts other people, and that you know, that rules are good for the social order. And so this is from Travis Hershey. It was written in 1969. So it's kind of an extension of the Gluecks and the Gluecks' perspective but it's still yet another perspective, and that is, again, Travis Hershey. And he has a number of other good things that are out there. I think I mentioned in the other session, in the first session, his name is part of a group. It was Gottfredson and Hershey in just beginning to start this whole course. So Travis Hershey, very well known, and talk about him a lot throughout criminal justice courses. So hey, hopefully this has been helpful. We're trying to get you started off on the right path. Of course, you need to do your own reading, your own research, respond to discussions, and push forward with wikis, journals, and also your final project. Let me know if you have questions, like I said at the beginning of this. I'm always here to help you. Thanks for watching. We'll be back soon with another short video.